Actually, capitalism.
I'm going to circle the left-hand side because I think that's got more possibilities for us. What is 1 plus cotangent squared?
Oh.
1 plus cotangent squared is? Cosecant squared. What's 1 minus sine squared? Cosine squared. So my first substitution, I'm substituting each factor, if you will. Kind of looks like somebody factored a quadratic there. So 1 plus cotangent squared is cosecant. 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. What's another way to write cosecant squared? Now, if you want to put cosine squared over 1, go ahead, but when you multiply fractions, you multiply across the top, you multiply across the bottom. So on the top, I end up with cosine squared of x. On the bottom, I end up with sine squared of x. What is that?
Squared.
So that's my cotangent squared of x. Now, one of the things I want to point out is, in 5.1, simplify, you might have taken something like this and felt pretty good about leaving it here. Because we had two factors with two terms, down to this red one, cosecant squared times cosine squared, is down to one term, two factors. But we do want to squish them together anyway, but we had to get to cotangent squared on this problem. So that's how it works. Somebody said do the right-hand side. One of the things that I would look at, and we talked about it yesterday, is once they start mixing up a bunch of other trig functions, and I don't have any Pythagorean identities to substitute out, we might want to turn this into an all sine cosine problem. So I'm going to write it as 1 over secant is 1 over cosine. Tangent is sine over cosine. No.
Oh wait,
No secant squareds or tangent squared, so you can't use Pythagorean identity. Now what you created is what's called a complex fraction. You have fractions within a fraction. So I'm going to work on this denominator at the bottom. So this is 1 over 1 minus the sine of u divided by the cosine of u. So anyway, the cosines were my denominator, so that's how I can put them together. And you're adding or subtracting the numerators, so 1 minus sine. At this point, we're going to get rid of the complex fraction. And so what we're going to do is take 1, which is my top numerator, my top fraction, or whatever you want to call it, times cosine over 1 minus sine.
Why would it be 1?
So what I did is I'm dividing by a fraction. So now I'm multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm taking 1 and dividing by a fraction. Now I'm taking 1 and multiplying by the reciprocal. Most of you would just do that step mentally and come up with cosine u over 1 minus sine u. Because you might think of this right here. The definition of a reciprocal is 1 over the fraction. So if I undo the reciprocal, it's cosine of u 1 minus sine u. Okay, so I'm just bringing this step down here, so you guys, I don't know where you guys are on your paper, but okay, so this is nice. I mean, it doesn't seem like much. We had a few steps in there to get to here. What did we do yesterday? We had a similar problem yesterday.
Cosine squared.
You could create a cosine squared by multiplying top by cosine, bottom by cosine.
Multiply by the conjugate.
So you could try that. That's one of those things I'll try. I'm going to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 1 plus sine of u over 1 plus the sine of u. Now keep in mind we're trying to get to secant plus tangent. So I have cosine times 1 plus sine of u. I'm not going to distribute. When you multiply the bottom, it's a conjugate rule, so just do the 1 times 1 minus sine squared of u.
That's the same. Cosine.
It is.
I got it.
So this is cosine 1 plus sine all over the bottom is what we're changing out. Number one Pythagorean identity. If you take the sine squared to the other side, it's 1 minus sine squared. You'd be leaving the cosine squared behind. What can you do there? Little chunga chunga. Now,
But that's not squared.
right. So I'm left with 1 plus sine of u on top. You said it's not squared, but how? So I had 1 cosine on top and 2 cosines on bottom. So when we do the crossing off,
Oh, 1 cosine up.
we still have 1 left on the bottom. Yep. What do you do here? What do you do here?
Split it.
So it's 1 over cosine plus sine over cosine. What's 1 over cosine? Secant. What's sine over cosine? Tangent. And that's what we were looking for.